Our first speaker now is Richard Fitzgerald. Richard is from Methven, the Canterbury Plains in New Zealand, and Richard is the Chief Executive Officer of the New Zealand Young Farmers Association. So please welcome Richard.
Thank you, Richard. Kia ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings from New Zealand, and it's great to be here. It's been a privilege travelling with my Australian colleagues over the last, central last year, 7 weeks. It was a fantastic time, and I certainly got to like some Australians, so they were in the other groups. And so it's been really good to be here and be able to speak to you. I'd like to first of all start off by thanking my wife, and I think like with all the other scholars, it's really difficult for the families, and so being able to have the opportunity to take and travel across the world for an extended period of time is a tremendous privilege. So I'm very grateful to Ruth, my wife, and my kids who unfortunately couldn't join me here. I'd like to thank our sponsors in New Zealand, particularly Dairy NZ and Beef and Lamb. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Nuffield Australia as well, perhaps on behalf of my other two Nuffield colleagues from New Zealand. We really appreciate the opportunity that Nuffield Australia provides us by linking into this fantastic network, and I'm really looking forward to many years of catching up with certainly my cohorts and the other Nuffield scholars across the ditch for us. So thank you very much. So just a little bit of background about myself. My wife and I own a mixed cropping farm on the Canterbury Plains. It's actually 253 hectares. When I read my notes before, I made a mistake. It's slightly larger, but certainly not 10,000 acre paddocks. My wife actually runs our business, and I'm full-time running an organisation called New Zealand Young Farmers, and so currently Chief Executive Officer. So our work is about connecting young people and growing them. So actually creating an environment where they can actually patch into values and see opportunities and grow their personal skill sets that they take into business, transferable skills. And it's a tremendously exciting and stimulating program. And as in the poster on the picture there, the Young Farmer Contest for us is our crown jewel. So 9 episodes of television on primetime TV. We're pretty proud of it. So last year with my Nuffield travels, basically did 2.5 laps of the world, and it was a great opportunity to see the world and get an overall context of what's going on. So my private study actually rotated around Western countries, so Western industrial agricultural economies, I suppose, but also with our global focus tool being actually able to see developing and emerging agricultural economies provide a lot of context for some of the issues that were emerging and maybe are going to be facing us as a globe, as a world economy in future years. So I was intrigued when we went to our Contemporary Scholars Conference at the start of last year. We sat around and talked to our European colleagues, and of course with the Aussies and the Kiwis, Canada and US. And what I was really intrigued about is that the scholars over there were actually quite consumed with optimising, maximising the subsidised economy and the agricultural economy that they operated in. And it just intrigued me because here you had some of the brightest minds and emerging talent in the whole agricultural world, and they were consumed with actually looking at how they can maximise their business opportunities within a subsidised environment, rather than sharing and swapping ideas. And so it triggered a whole line of thinking in my mind around, well, what stimulates someone to actually take a risk and actually look to grow their business through innovative practices, and how do you justify taking this risk against the opportunity that you're kind of understanding and perceiving? And so my topic just took a slight tweak and turn at that stage, and so I looked at trying to understand what drives the adoption of innovation for farmers, whether it's on farm or off farm. And it was really quite a curious odyssey, actually, just trying to understand the mind of a farmer. And there's a whole ton of social research that sits in behind this. But there's actually some characteristics within agricultural people and rural people that actually, I think, we just needed to understand a little bit more. So I guess the context for my research was this increasingly more complex business environment. And like we've heard from our colleagues earlier on today, there's a lot of focus on food security, food safety, and we're targeting high-end consumers. So what they think is actually really, really important to us. Issues around the value chain and I guess the social contract that urban people almost offer back to farmers and users of the land. We need to understand what's actually what's driving their aspirations for their country and all that sort of stuff. So the food story and buy local were actually quite major themes across the globe as we travelled. And the other major theme that surfaced constantly across all the continents and across all the countries is this human capital issue, young people moving into agriculture. It's a significant issue not only for New Zealand, not only for Australia, but actually across the world. And we need people that will actually have the skills and the talent and the motivation to actually take risks and drive food production forward. And so if we're going to meet this challenge of feeding 9 million people by 2050, then who's going to do that? Well, it's actually going to be the generation that are now emerging. So there's a whole lot of questions that are spinning around in my mind around what does it take to actually get people to take the risk, have a punt, move out of their comfort zone, and actually try something new. And then how do we support that? So as I went around, and particularly across the Straits, across the United States, I spoke to a lot of academics and land-grant university people based there. And there were sort of 3 key areas that started emerging as actually quite important areas that we needed to understand better. So when we looked at an individual, what's actually the precursor for someone to take a risk? What's the precursor for someone to actually look at trying something different, trying something new? And can we stimulate and build curiosity into what would be that sort of nubile and emerging young mind? And so clearly there were 2 areas, formal education and informal development. So this is not particularly new, but I think the underlying principle behind it is that how do we actually create curiosity? How do we create an inquiring mind? Because that's the actual bed that innovation is based on. And so by creating an environment through formal education, which is then interacting with informal development through the likes of Nuffield Scholarship, through involvement in committees and network groups and so on, you're actually cultivating minds that are more curious than those that aren't involved in that stuff. And so how do we actually then continue to stimulate that participation in other activities coupled with formal education? Then as someone moves from, progresses through their career, then the opportunity to identify and actually capitalise an innovation is actually about having a creative tension in their mind. So the opportunity is sitting out there. What's driving them to actually look at that opportunity and maybe implement it? And so there's this risk-reward equation that's going, in a subconscious mind, I guess. And that tension is actually driving or drawing someone to an innovation. And so within that innovation sits the opportunity for that person to go, right, actually my life is going to be a better life tomorrow because I've implemented this innovation. And so there's a whole lot of personal factors, personal drivers, as well as actually environmental factors that play into this and actually determine or influence or support whether an innovation is more appealing or less appealing. And then finally, the third area that I saw was some really nice work going on, particularly in the States, around the support framework for innovation. So just like a plant, you put a seed in the ground, it needs water, it needs nutrition, it needs sunlight, it's vulnerable to the weather and the wind, and it can be dried out and so on. So what's the environment that actually sits around a new idea so that it actually can be planted, the seed can germinate and actually flourish and grow into new ideas? And so I saw 2 major areas that I've really teased out in terms of my thinking since then, and that's the process of talent development. How do we actually generate an appetite for a farmer to actually want to change their behaviour, to actually look at taking on new ideas? And so it's about, and so I saw a particularly interesting program in the UK that's just been kind of launched, if you like, called Dairy Pro, where there's a continual professional development program with some really neat innovations around technology. For example, an extension activity will be assessed and have a certain number of accredited points awarded to it. So someone who turns up takes their membership card, swipe card, goes straight online and registers that activity against their account online. Excuse me. And so a certain number of points are accumulated per year by doing this. And this is not a particularly new process, but some of the technology that supports it and actually makes the consumption of this activity and participation in the activity actually really quite easy for farmers to be involved in. So in New Zealand, we're now looking at the CPD process around a broader range of industry activities. The other activity, the other innovation that I really liked is actually an innovation incubator. So once again, the land-grant universities, particularly the extension aspects of their business, revolved around having an environment that's deliberately constructed, that actually manages the process of someone to explore, discover, and then take on new ideas, and then that support environment that sits around that. So the key elements of this is actually having a deliberate process of creative discovery. It's about putting people around them that are trusted advisors, so people that are knowledgeable in certain areas, but actually can ask the right questions and stimulate discussion and I guess challenge the thinking of an individual within a safe group environment. And then thirdly, actually having that group that they're participating in as a very, very diverse group, so a wide range of ages, a wide range of backgrounds, not necessarily agriculturally based at all, but a whole range of skill sets that actually collectively come together as a really stimulating, challenging and inspiring group for people to participate in. But interestingly, in the US that I was able to establish anyway, most of these innovation incubators occur beyond the farm gate. And so when I started percolating the idea around, is this possible to actually be done within the farm gate, thinking there's some network development work going on in New Zealand, there was actually no level of consciousness that it can actually be done within a farm gate environment, so with primary producers. And I think there's actually a tremendous opportunity there because farmers are tremendously creative people. So really, what does this mean for, I've said New Zealand agriculture, but I actually think the wide agricultural industry. I think these questions are important for all of us to ask. And the best analogy I can think of as a sheep farmer at home with young stock is we take a lot of care around our hoggets and our lambs and our heifers and so on. But we don't seem to invest the same amount of care and energy into our young people who are the next generation of leaders. And I think that's a real challenge for not just farmers, but actually the wider agricultural industry and policy makers as well. You will reap what we sow. And if we're not investing in young people, then we're actually, what else should we be investing in, really? Then when we look at the adoption of innovation, then it's about understanding that there's actually a whole matrix of drivers that will actually stimulate the adoption of innovation. It's not just a financial benefit, but actually moral and ethical issues that are quite important and actually primary drivers for some people or just contributing drivers. So we need to understand better what actually motivates someone to take that risk, have a punt and get cracking on it. And then thirdly is actually what's the environment that we have around our entrepreneurs and our innovators that actually supports not only the seed of the idea, but actually grows it into something that's actually real and actually increasing productivity, sustainability, viability of our primary industry.